Liz Merrick, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Rebecca Fisher, and on behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, Delaware, I welcome you to our in-person and online worship service. Come as you are this morning. Please feel welcome to arrive here as your whole self, with all your identities and ideas, your troubles, your triumphs, your hopes, your fears, and all of your love. As Unitarian Universalists, we value and encourage the individual search for truth and meaning, while at the same time working in community to build a more compassionate, more just world for all beings. Next week will be our water communion, the gathering of the waters. So please remember to bring your vial or jar or flask or any container of water from any water source that has meaning to you, your home perhaps, or a stream, something from your travels. And bring it with you if you're coming in person to church. So, something to remember. Water communion next week. To learn more about what's happening at First Unitarian, please visit our website, firstuuwilm.org. That's all one word, firstuuwilm.org. And sign up for our e-news so you'll receive information about everything that's going on at First U. And if you do that, you'll get a little reminder on Friday that it's the water communion on Sunday and you won't arrive on Sunday, like, duh. Tomorrow is our annual observance of Labor Day here in the U.S. So amidst all the sales and picnics, we'd like to take a moment to recognize the contributions workers make to families and our society. And remember that all honest work deserves respect. And we're still struggling for fair pay, safe working conditions, and equitable treatment. So we pray that those struggles continue to make progress. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Larry Pierce, and I am so thrilled to be with you today on this summer day. I'm not ready to say toward the end of summer day, not quite yet. So let's enjoy every moment, and let's enjoy our time together, whether we're joining online or here in the sanctuary this morning. The opening words that I will share with you this morning are adapted from a song that perhaps you may have heard from Holly Near. I'll start, and then I will invite you to join in these opening words as well. I am willing and I am open, for to be hopeless would be so strange. It dishonors those who have come before us, so lift us up in the light of change. So now you'll repeat after me. We are willing and we are open. Well, let's try that one more time with conviction. We are willing and we are open. For to be hopeless would be so strange. It dishonors those who went before us. So lift us up in the light of change.
If you have a chalice at home, this is the moment to get it ready. I invite you to join us by lighting it as I read these words by the Reverend Scott Taylor. May the flame we now kindle light the path back to our center, back to that place of belonging, to what is true, what is deepest within, what knows us even before we know ourselves. And may our chalice remind us that we are held and welcomed whole, without the need to hide a single piece or part of who we are. Please stand for our hymn, Hail the Glorious Golden City. And I apologize for not reminding you of the hymn number in case you wanted to go old school and use the book. I'm new at this, so that's what I've learned today. Please join me in affirming our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action. Now, would you please join me in this responsive reading which is a contemporary translation of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. I think you'll recognize it when we start reading it. This was translated by Rabbi Rami Shapiro, and your responses will be found on the screen. Everything in this world has its moment, a season of ripening and falling away.
Moments of birthing and moments of dying, moments of planting and moments of reaping.
Moments of killing and moments of healing. Moments of demolition and moments of building.
Moments of weeping and moments of laughing. Moments of mourning and moments of dancing.
Moments of scattering stones and moments of gathering stones. Moments of embracing and moments of distance.
Moments of seeking and moments of losing. Moments of clinging and moments of releasing.
Moments of tearing and moments of mending. Moments of silence and moments of talking.
Moments of loving and moments of hating. Moments of warring and moments of peacemaking. Let us join together now in a time of prayerful meditation and reflection. For our reflection this morning, I've chosen a piece from a book entitled The Call, Discovering Why You Are Here. I know some of you are going to want to grab this book from my hands at the end of the service and look for the answer. But this is a book written by Uriah Mountain Dreamer. I'm going to read a section here as a way for us to reflect on our own particular calling, the whispers within our own hearts and souls. She writes, "There is a quest within us to hear and heed the call at the center of our lives. The call to live the meaning, the why, at the center of all of our lives. It is an invitation to you to turn your attention to the call at the center of your life so that together we might begin to live consciously who and what we are, and in so doing, alleviate suffering in our lives and in the world, and embody the deep happiness that is our birthright." The call is that consistent tug we feel at the center of our lives to do more than just continue, to know and fulfill the meaning of our lives. The call is always there, whispering in the soft places of our bodies and hearts, in the longing that reminds us what we ache for at the deepest level. So in this shared silence, let us take a moment to hear the whispers in the soft places in our own bodies and hearts, to touch once again that which gives our life meaning, to open our hearts to the spark that illuminates us and radiates from us as we live our days. Each week we take some time within our service to attend to the concerns of our own heart, that which we are holding, that which is weighing us down in a particular way, that which we need not hold alone. We take a time to listen to our concerns for ourselves, for our own lives. We take a time to listen for the concerns that we might hold for a loved one or someone that we care about. And we take a moment to pause in each other's presence, to listen to the concerns, all of these concerns, and the concerns that we have for our common world. And so, either in the chat or if you care to, speak aloud in this room your particular concern, your particular prayer, so that you need not hold it alone. For all the concerns of our heart, those that have been spoken or unspoken, may we find peace and healing among us. Amen. The brief reading that I will share with you now comes from a letter to a young activist during troubled times and was written by Clarissa Pincola Estes. She writes, "My friends, don't lose heart. We are made for these times. I have heard from so many who are deeply and properly bewildered. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most. You are right in your assessments, yet I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit by bewailing these difficult times. Especially, do not lose hope. Most particularly because the fact is that we were made for these times. Yes, for years we have been learning, practicing, and been in training for and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. So I have been pondering these words from a letter to a young activist during troubled times by Clarissa Pinkola Estes for some months now. In particular, I've grappled with those phrases, my friends, don't lose heart. We were made for these times. I've been wondering, how could we have been made for these times since so much of what we're dealing with didn't seem to be on the horizon even a decade ago? Sure, there were indications that we were headed to a climate crisis. Certainly, racial injustice was obviously going to be an ongoing, long-term struggle. But a global pandemic, were we made for that? The tactical and violent attacks on democratic processes by even those in power, were we prepared for that? The seemingly rapid and extensiveness of the climate crisis, the relentlessness of gun violence, could any of us have conceived, as Pinkola Estes proclaims, that we were made for these times? So as those who attended my workshop this week at our reemergence camp know, I decided that rather than to make her statement a declaration, as in we were made for these times, I made it into a proposition instead. What if we were made for these times? So somehow stating it as a proposition rather than a question with a yes or a no kind of response, what if opens up my imagination and maybe yours as well. It allows me to consider, in what ways have we been made for these times? Stating it this way allows me to see the capacities that I might not otherwise see. Stating it this way allows me to consider, what are those practices that we've developed and honed and cultivated that can be enhanced and brought intentionally into the response to the times in which we live? Indeed, I think we can ponder, in what ways have we been made for these times? It is so easy to lose heart in the times in which we live, right? Let's pause for a moment and let the reality of these times that we are in land in this room and land on our hearts together. So my source here is Jane Goodall, the famous naturalist who's now 88 years old. She writes, See if you identify with some of her description of this time. We're going through dark times. There's armed conflict in many parts of the world, racial and religious discrimination, hate crimes, terrorist attacks, a political swing to the far right, fueling demonstrations and protests, all too often that become violent. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening and fomenting anger and unrest. Democracy is under attack in many countries. On top of that, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused so much suffering and death, loss of jobs, and economic chaos around the world. And the climate crisis is an even greater threat to our future, indeed to all life on earth as we know it. It's hard to hear those words. It's hard to hear those words again and again, but to know that we are in these times is both sobering, but I also hope motivating for us as we begin to formulate our own responses. Now, I got to hear Goodall at an online conference this summer, and I became so intrigued by her relentless spirit and her sense of hope. Yes, hope. You see, the book from which this quote comes from is entitled The Book of Hope, Survival Guide for Trying Times. When asked how she could have hope, how has she not lost heart in this time, in these times that we are in, she replied, yes, I do believe there is evil among us. But how much more powerful and inspirational are the voices of those who stand up against it. And even when they lose their lives, their voices still resonate long after they are gone, giving us inspiration and hope. Jane Goodall has not joined the chorus that is so luring these days, the chorus that says, what's the use? Why bother? How can we do what we want to do with those people having so much influence on what's happening? I'm inspired by those who are called to embody an active hope, not an ethereal hope, but a hope that leads to action and engagement, not helplessness and hopelessness. An active hope. With Goodall, I believe that in what she declares is the cumulative effect of thousands of ethical actions can help to save and improve our world for future generations. We do have a choice. We do have a choice. Do we bemoan, withdraw, pontificate, or do we join in the process or the procession of those who, no matter how hopeless and helpless it feels, still decide to take ethical actions to save and improve the world for future generations? That's a choice before us. And as your minister, I feel called to do what I can to orient the perspective and the work of this congregation towards being a house of hope, where we can cultivate continuously, forthrightly, intentionally, and faithfully that hope, where we can inspire and support one another towards having conversations that really matter, to take actions that really matter, and to getting our rumps in gear to respond to answering the call of our times. My friends, we recognize that this is not a time to go through the motions in our own lives or in our congregation. This is not a time in our own lives or in our congregation to be captivated by the luring and numbing nostalgia of what used to be. This is not a time in our lives or in this congregation to be in neutral or in cruise control or even in reverse. No. This is a time to aim our actions toward what brings hope, what gives hope, and what embodies hope. This is a time to aim our efforts towards something that calls from us our best responses, not the tired, predictable responses to the challenges of our time, because it is not just what we do, it is how we aim what we do that matters most. Let's face it. We often, and I include myself in this, give ourselves an exemption to answering the call of our times. Sometimes we can just relinquish responsibility to others who may be more passionate, more self-righteous, more organized, because we're too busy. We are too overwhelmed. We are too fed up, or, well, we are too old. Let's stay with that last reason for a moment. I'm not quite sure why. But my longtime friend Parker Palmer points out in his book On the Brink of Everything, Grace, Gravity, and Getting Old, that relinquishing our responsibility because of our age is irresponsible. He states, it is unfair to lay all responsibility for the future on the younger generation. After all, he writes, the problems they face are partly due to the fact that we, their elders, screwed up. Worse still, it's not true that the young alone are in charge of what comes next. We, young and old together, hold the future in our hands. If our common life is to become more compassionate, creative, and just, it will take an intergenerational effort, he proclaims. So Palmer takes this particular excuse, we're too old, off the table. Instead, he challenges us, and he advises us to do the opposite of what we might be inclined to do in the face of the challenges of our time. Palmer gives us this guidance, which I'm going to summarize as briefly as I can. Are you ready for some guidance? Yes? No? Okay. Give it to me, they say. So this is from Palmer. First, he says, reach out to the younger generation, not to advise them, but to learn from them. Gain energy from them and support them in their way. Second, move toward whatever you fear, not away from it. I told you, these were not usually our inclinations. He relates this story. I try to remember, he writes, the advice I was given on an Outward Bound course when I was frozen with fear on a rock face in the middle of a 100-foot rappel. If you can't get out of it, get into it. Let's repeat that. If you can't get out of it, get into it. One more time. If, for example, he writes, you fear the other, get into his or her story face to face and watch your fear shrink as your empathy expands. And then he gives this next piece of advice or guidance. Spend time in the natural world. as much time as you can. Nature constantly reminds me, he writes, that everything has a place, that nothing need be excluded. That mess on the forest floor, like the messes in my own life, has an amazing integrity and harmony to it. I appreciate this guidance of Goodall and Palmer as I've reflected on this theme of answering the call of these times. It's provocative guidance. Perhaps it can help us to recognize that if we're not reaching out to younger generations, or younger generations reaching out to older generations, if we're not moving towards what we fear, and we're not embracing the mess that we're in, then we are listening to other voices within us and around us. These voices oftentimes do keep us in cruise control, in neutral, or cause us to go into reverse, rather than mobilize ourselves to be engaged consistently in active hope, rather than the comfort of passive despair. I believe that it would be worth our while to acknowledge that if we're not answering the call of our times, that we may indeed be responding to other voices within us and around us. Here are some of those voices that I'm aware of. The voices that prejudge situations or persons by saying, "What's the use? They'll never budge. It will never change." Familiar? We can have conversations with each other in this room. Are those familiar voices? Yes or no? Okay. Another voice is the voice that rehashes and reinforces this us-them perspective that relinquishes our own role. Usually we're the us and they are the them. Relinquishes our own role and capacity to shift this paralyzing and polarizing dynamic. And then there are those voices that close us off to listening to what may be calling us, to what we may be called to be and to become for the sake of our future, for the sake of future generations. It'd be good for us to remember some of the examples of history of those who refused to listen to the voices of helplessness and hopelessness, who moved toward their fear for the sake of something larger. This Labor Day weekend is a good time for us to remember at least one of those stories. In 1894, thousands of workers at the Pullman Company went on strike in response to their wages being cut, while the rent in the company town that they were forced to live in, oftentimes of Pullman on Chicago's South Side, remained the same. These mostly all African American workers decided to strike rather than comply or adapt or accommodate to this unfair setup. They found power within and among themselves to say enough, to declare no to the exploitation and injustice that they were asked to comply with. Later that year, because of this kind of example, President Grover Cleveland officially designated Labor Day as a holiday in the United States to honor the labor movement, which has many of its roots in Chicago and in the efforts of these Pullman workers and other workers to respond to what they felt called to do. And they knew that they must do something for the sake of their own well-being and for the sake of future generations as well. They knew that they needed to do something for the sake of their own dignity. So I want to say that we need to aim our actions somewhere, usually something higher, something broader, something wider than we might typically think about. Perhaps you've heard this story. A traveler happened upon a large group of workers adjacent to a river, and the traveler felt that he had to somehow inquire about the work that they were doing. With a slight detour, he moved toward the first of the three tradespeople, and he said, "My dear fellow, what is it that you are doing?" The person continued their work and grumbled, "I'm cutting stones." Realizing that the mason did not wish to engage in a conversation, the traveler went on to the second person and repeated the question, "What is it that you're doing?" To the traveler's delight, this time the man stopped his work ever so briefly, and he stated that he was a stone cutter. And then he added, "I came to this place from the north to work, but as soon as I earned enough money, I will return home." The traveler thanked the second person and then saw a third person. And so he reached towards the third person, and once again he asked his original question, "My dear fellow, what is it that you are doing?" This time the worker paused, glanced at the traveler until they made eye contact, and then he looked skyward, drawing the traveler's eyes upward. And the third mason replied, "I'm a mason, and I am building a cathedral. I have journeyed many miles to be part of this team that is constructing its magnificent cathedral. I have spent many months away from my family, and I miss them dearly. However, I know how important this cathedral will be one day, and I know how many people will find sanctuary and solace there." He also told the traveler that the cathedral would not be completed in his own lifetime, in our days, but that the future depends upon our hard work now. I suppose you get the point of the story. Same activity, but a different perspective in terms of what that work was about. It's about having discipline of asking ourselves each day, for the sake of what am I doing what it is that I'm doing? That's worth repeating too. We're having a lot of repeats today. So for the sake of what am I doing what it is that I'm doing? It's like a tongue twister, huh? So let's just keep it shorter. For the sake of what am I doing this? I think it's a good question to ask ourselves each day, each task that we approach. It's about not going through the motions, not just focused on getting by and getting through the same routines, but about aiming our efforts towards something larger that will serve not just the immediate, but the future and some future generations. This story is about recognizing that whatever our habits of grumbling to ourselves or others might be, that grumbling doesn't shift anything. I know that's breaking news for some of us. Grumbling tends to drain energy rather than enroll us in something larger and something bigger. So I stand before you today inspired. Over this past week, people in our congregation and others gathered in person or online to participate in our re-emergence summer camp. We showed up for one another. I met people I have never yet met during this past year, in person. People said, "I needed this." Others said, "I have felt so isolated." What really inspired me as well, however, is that more than anything else, is that members of our congregation and staff of our congregation offered their particular talents or passion to one another in the various activities that were available. Almost 20 people or so made those opportunities available. Some shared art and making beauty. Some shared a passion for social justice and an end to gun violence. Some shared dancing or drumming with a wide range of ages. Some inspired us to sing new songs. Some provided spiritual nurture through meditation, chant, prayers, or songs in the daily vespers. Some offered prompts for us to write memoirs or reflections in poetry. Some set the stage for us to write dozens and dozens of get out the vote postcards. Some invited us to improvise. Some invited us to get to know something about who else was in the room through a people bingo, which was a very popular activity. Because of the willingness of over 20 people, at least 20 people, to offer what they had to give, we had some meaningful discussions. We had opportunities to create and express ourselves, and we had time to pause in the presence of what is holy and most worthy of our devotion. For the sake of what did we do this? For the sake of being an intergenerational community with one another. For the sake of reconnecting. For the sake of being church together. For the sake of reemerging in a time in which we cannot afford to relinquish our power and the power of the Spirit to happenstance. For our reemergence camp is over. But my friends, this camp was really only a jump start to what I hope will continue to be in a new church year, in which we continue to offer to one another our gifts. We continue to stretch ourselves. We continue to gather with purpose and intention for meaningful conversation, learning, and expression. In the face of all the voices within us and around us that would have us sit in the sidelines of these times in which we are in, I hope that we will continue to build, stone by stone, interaction by interaction, First Unitarian Church of Wilmington as a house of hope for ourselves and for those we are called to serve. During these times, you could say amen, go ahead. During these times in which we are in, may we be called to serve one another and to serve those in the surrounding community who are only an invitation away from you to finding this community. Rabbi Shapiro's translation of the reading that Rebecca did, Everything in This World Has Its Moment, a season of ripening and falling away, says that he uses that word moment because it captures for him the poignancy and the immediacy of being present to the times in which we are in. And I believe we need to be present to this moment. Not a moment that has gone by, not a moment that's too far in the future, but this moment for the sake of being what we are called to be together. If we are made for these times, then we are going to put more energy into calling ourselves forward. If we are made for these times, then we would not wait until the conditions are absolutely perfect, all the stars are aligned, before we did something in our corner of the world. If we are made for this time, then we would look at each other. Let's do that now. We would look at each other. And we would look around this room and gain strength from each other's presence, gain energy, and gain inspiration to do what is in our power to do. So may it be. Amen.
Um, I'm, I'm a total atheist, genetically, I believe. I just don't think I have it in me. And so receiving a call never fit into my concepts of spirituality until I experienced it. I'd gone on a personal retreat at the Omega Institute, which is up in New York State, and it happened to be the same week as Issei Barnwell's annual community singing retreat. We have a couple songs in our teal hymnal, I believe. The one, "We are going, heaven knows how we are going." There were many singers there that week, and I met a woman if you've ever been to Omega, you know there's like these communal dining tables. So you're sitting with people, you're maybe strangers to you. But she mentioned that she sang with a threshold choir. I don't know, I innocently asked her, "What's a threshold choir?" And when she described singing in small group a cappella harmony at the bedside of hospice patients, I was thunderstruck. It was as if someone had rung that gong, and I was the gong, and my body was just vibrating. This was something I was meant to do. This was something I had to do. So when I got home, I looked up the Threshold Choir website and found the nearest chapter was in Philadelphia, which was kind of, a difficult drive especially during rush hour, which is when I'd have to be going to their rehearsals. So, still feeling that this was something I needed to do, despite my dearth of experience directing a choir and lacking any skills in starting or leading an organization. I called up Jan Shea, who, of course, I know from this church, from the choir, and asked her to join me in forming a Delaware Threshold chapter. When you start a choir, you need rehearsal space. And this is a stumbling block for many of the little Threshold chapters because it's not always possible to rehearse in a living room. And this church provided me with rehearsal space, which was huge, and provided us with whatever support we needed to start our little Threshold chapter. And even though the Brandywine Threshold singers are now inactive, and I'm driving up to Philadelphia to rehearse anyway, I'll never forget how First Unitarians supported my efforts to build a choir to serve the dying and help me heed the call to do so. So please give generously today. And who knows what personal community and community calls we'll be supporting. So I'd like to invite you now to financially support the work of this congregation. There are 4 fundamental ways to give. You only need to choose one. They're on our slide on the screen. If you're here in the sanctuary, we have a box at the back where you can leave cash or checks. You can always mail a check in to the church. There's a donate button on our website, so you can find that online on our website. Or you can use the Vanco Mobile Faith Engagement app. You can download it on your smartphone and use that to make a contribution. Thank you so much for your generosity. Now, please join me in dedicating our offering. The words are on the screen. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings.
Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There
You going to help me extinguish the chalice? Thank you. Sorry to inconvenience you. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light guiding us forward on our paths, keeping our eyes, hearts, and minds open. And our closing hymn is number 312. So please rise as you are willing and able and help us sing here on the paths of every day. The words will be posted on the screen as well.
Here on the paths of every day, here on the common human way, is all the stuff the gods would take to build a heaven to mold and make new Edens, ours the task sublime to build eternity in time. We need no other stones to build the temple of the unfulfilled. No other altar for the doors, no other model for the floors, no other standard clear and deep, and all of our immortal dreams.
This benediction is adapted from a Franciscan blessing. May you be blessed with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deeply within your heart. May you be blessed with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May you be blessed with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them. And may you be blessed with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. So may it be. Amen.
Thank